Happy Pride from RHAC. We know that having conversations around sexual health can be difficult, and finding accurate information that relates to you can be a challenge. That's why RHAC has developed the Find Your Reason campaign. You can engage with our campaign at findyourreason.ca, register for our newsletter, and join the conversation. Happy Pride.
All right, hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is William Marchand and I work at RHAC. I am the gay men's community developer. And I'm very excited to welcome you to our fireside Pride Storytelling Yesterday, Today, Tomorrow event in collaboration with Pride London Festival. I would like to thank you all for joining. And of course, I would love to thank all of our guest speakers today. I'm going to go ahead now and allow each of them to give a little bit of background about themselves. So I'm going to start with Galaxy, if you want to start with yourself.
Hello, everybody. My name is Galaxy. I am a recent director on the Pride Board. I have lived in or around London for most of my life, so I'm very familiar with this community. I am also a drag performer. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. Thank you so much, I have to say, for allowing me to be a part of this this panel. RHAC is an organization that's very close to my heart, and I'm just thrilled to be here.
Thank you. And next, we have Reverend Bruce Lee.
Hello, I'm Reverend Bruce Lee. I'm an ordained minister within the Metropolitan Community Churches denomination. I came to London in 2015 to serve as the pastor of Metropolitan Community Church London, and served in that role until 2019, the year that the church then decided to close. I'm excited to be here. I moved with my partner and our raft of animals. We have 2 cats and 2 dogs, and very happy to make London our home. So thank you for asking me to be a part.
Thank you. And then next we have Olivia.
Hi, my name is Olivia Smith-Rodriguez, and I am the Women's Community Development Coordinator at the Regional HIV/AIDS Section with Will. I'm really excited to be a part of this panel. I've been in London for almost 7 or 8 years now, which wasn't my original intent. I was positive that once I started university, I would take off back to BC or some other place, but London has gotten a little place in my heart, and I'm very happy to be here and to speak on this panel. I identify as a queer woman, and I'm happy to share some of these experiences with you today.
And next we have Sammy.
Hey everyone, I'm Sammy. I use they, them, and he, him pronouns. I've lived in London basically my entire life. I'm 24 now, so I've been 23 years here. And I also used to do drag with Galaxy, actually, as Derek McCocker, so that's a fun thing about me. I'm a business student at Marchand, finishing my last year, and hopefully opening something up here in London that's, you know, very like queer friendly and like just like a nice spot to hang out and, you know, be with your friends and yeah, just change London a little bit. So, and thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you. And we have Richard.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to copy people a little bit. So I've been in London probably about 13 or 14 years at this point. Currently, I work as a program coordinator for an HIV testing program at Intercommunity Health Center. So I've worked in social services in London basically the entire time that I have lived in this community. My pronouns are he, him. I identify as a gay man. So outside of the work that I'm doing now, I've also helped facilitate some LGBTQ plus youth groups, including at Regional HIV/AIDS Connection, as well as at Pride Western. I've done drag like 2 or 3 times with another individual on this panel. Maybe they will mention it. Yeah, so I am a proud member of the word that I use is queer community here in London. And I like what Sammy said. I think, you know, we can always do better. And I think like building community and changing things and acknowledging what we have and what we don't is always important to me. So I think conversations like this is how we start to do those sorts of things. So I'm happy to be part of this. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And then we have Dana.
Hi there. My name is Dana Nocella. I am a 46-and-a-half-year-old lesbian living in London now for 20 years this year. Previous to that, I was in Toronto for a couple of years and cut my teeth in Windsor, where I went to school and grew up just outside of Windsor. Thrilled to be part of this panel. Currently, I am a local photographer in the region, Connects Ontario, which is provincial system navigator in information for mental health and addiction services. I did work with the Regional AIDS Connection for, 6 or 7 years. I have some roots in the women's shelter. I was a facilitator for Open Closet, as well as Pride Western, alongside with Richard. For both of those, so a long history within the community. Proud to say I'm a gutter boy with the Drag King troupe here in London. It also our 20th anniversary year this year, so I'm proud to be part of that in our history, and certainly looking forward to a timely discussion of things that are going on in this world of ours, and hopefully I've hidden all of my laundry and that you cannot see me, so no judgment. So anyway, thanks for having me.
Thank you. And I also would like to acknowledge Jennifer, who is providing our ASL interpretation. And also I would like to thank Andrew from Pride London Festival, who is helping out with tech and also who has been a major part of this collaboration as well. So thank you so much to everyone for being here and for lending your voices. And I'm really excited about starting this conversation. So basically, you know, I had sent out a list of questions, and there were 4 questions that I thought that we could start with that relate directly to Pride. And Galaxy, I'm going to have you be our honorary first question answerer. So basically, what does Pride mean to you, and how do you generally celebrate or contribute to Pride?
So I guess for me, Pride it's sort of a community thing. It's you standing with your community, your friends, your family, and your allies in celebration and understanding that we've come this far. Like we've come this far that we can actually have the platform and the grounds to celebrate. But at the same time, understanding how far we have to go from here. There's still so much work that needs to be done. So the way that I celebrate basically by educating myself and by surrounding myself with a diverse group of people, very similar to this panel actually, so that I can learn different perspectives and have a more defined appreciation for what pride means to me.
Perfect. Wonderful. Thank you. And how about yourself, Reverend Lee?
Feel free to call me just Bruce. That's okay. Pride means friends and family to me, to be honest. I love gathering together with people who are part of my family of choice, and being able to experience a rich connection with people. So getting together for dinner, having a barbecue, having a backyard party is what's important to me. And that's come about and shifted over the years. And I quickly realized during the introduction that you just gave of the group, as you talked about pride experiences yesterday, today, and tomorrow, I think you gathered me for the yesterday piece as I look at most of our participants here. But part of my experience has changed so much with pride and with celebrating pride. And really, in the end, it's come down to gathering friends and family. My involvement has been all over the place, from being a viewer at the sides of a parade to being front and center, leading the MCC London portion within the parade with all the other good folks who are there, to sometimes sitting on the back deck at home enjoying a good book while listening to the music from Pride that was wafting through the airwaves.
Wonderful. And how about yourself, Olivia? What does pride mean to you, and how do you contribute or celebrate?
Pride to me, I think my experience of pride is very new and very fresh in some ways. I only came out, I guess, 2 years ago now, maybe a year and a half, really. Though someone else on this panel, Sammy, saw me for it way earlier. They knew, but I didn't for years. I'm really lucky that my family is like incredibly inclusive and really kind, and that they've always been very focused on the fact that diversity and people of difference is what makes everyone so exciting and so worthy of loving. And so I went to pride parades as a kid, and we would go, and I was always there as an ally, a really excited ally, maybe like a little too invested as an ally. But so in turn, I've only gone to 2 pride parades as a person who is out and queer and talking about it and living that experience. So for me, it's really meant, it's been finding myself. And I'm sure that answer will change in a couple of years, but to really kind of finally shirk off this feeling of there's always something about you that you can't quite say yet, even though I was in a very loving, like really wonderful family and had lots of loving friends who also all came out and were like just waiting. Everyone was just waiting. They were on the nose. So yeah, it's been a real journey of self-love and care. And then in turn, loving others.
And how about yourself, Sammy?
I don't know, all your answers are really great, and like they're very nice, and like I feel like I have a very I don't know, when I first like started in like getting invested in pride, I guess, you know, I was very excited and like just like ready to like, you know, express my queerness, and I don't know, just like I guess like a few experiences here and there, and now I guess this would have been my 5th year going to Pride if I'd gone. And I don't know, I just like I have a very hard time kind of like putting myself in like that celebration mindset now. And it's almost hard to just like go out and like try and have fun and like party and, you know, be like, oh yeah, like we're having a great time, and, like look at us like being crazy and stuff. And I don't know, I almost like miss that feeling. But now it's very different, where I very much enjoy like just like being with my friends and like my family and like being like by myself sometimes, like just, like celebrate Pride, like reading a book or, like having some tea or something like that. And just like educating myself and I don't know, do something different, I guess, from like the norm of what we see about Pride, like the glam and all that. Still love it. I love the rainbows. Like, so yeah, I don't know. I guess that's my answer.
Wonderful. And so how about yourself, Richard? What does your thoughts on Pride, or what does Pride mean to you, and how does that kind of shape how you celebrate or you contribute in the community and beyond?
So it's interesting listening to everyone. I love when other people talk before me because then I can sort of steal. No, I'm just kidding. But I think the interesting point that's been made and that what's been going through my head is Pride has evolved for me in terms of what it means. I think I bring a little bit of yesterday, just to echo what Bruce was saying there. I'm in my 40s now, and I think of when I first came out in my teens, Pride was a big party, right? Like I wanted to go there. I wanted to meet people like me. I wanted to hook up. I wanted to do all of those things. I was excited just to not feel so isolated. And I feel as I've gotten older, it's interesting. I've kind of been thinking while folks have been talking, the evolution for me has been, I used to go kind of looking for other people, and now I notice who I don't see when I go to Pride. Like I notice, it's hard, I can't ignore right now what's happening in our society and things that are happening around Black Lives Matter and things that are happening politically in our world where, we need to acknowledge all of these things. So I think for me, as I've gotten older, Pride has become a lot more political than it used to be. It used to be very party centric, and I still go looking to have fun, be with my peers, maybe go to a backyard barbecue, go to a dance. But I go and I also look for people I can connect with, people I can talk to about changing climates, what it means to be queer, what it means to be trans, what it means to be gay. So I think for me, it's definitely a thing that's always evolving. I probably exist in a quieter way. I kind of look for little conversations, whereas I might before look for a big party, like a big spectacle. But now it's about, for me, like a bit more growth mixed with celebration. I think Pride is lots of things, and I think as I get older, it'll continue to change. That just sounds like a theme which is very cool from everyone here, that it becomes something different, I think, like every time that you go, depending on what's going on in the world as well.
Wonderful, thank you. And Dana, last but not least, what is your perspective on that question?
I was just doing the math in my head, and this would be so I came out when I was 17. And so this is 30 years for me of experiencing, Pride years. I don't think I've ever missed a Pride, whether it was in Windsor, where it was started at some very little parking lot, to, going to many Toronto Prides, even when I lived there, participating in Pride in Toronto, to London and watching London's Pride sort of evolve and change. For me, it's about, being visible, and through the years, sort of our visibility has become not less important, but less recognized. And so when I attend Pride events, it's about being visible in numbers, and to remind people that we are here, and we have an important place in society. As to Richard said, it's certainly become a lot more political in the last few years, and certainly Pride is a platform to discuss many other issues and concerns that affect our brothers and sisters. I certainly remember, the good times, and certainly it's about friendships, and it's about community and family, chosen family. But how I celebrate Pride, you know, for years we've been doing drag shows, which is really important to maintaining that historical component and representing, you know, part of that community that we've been doing that for a really long time, and the fun that ensues, and to see people maybe that I don't ever see unless it's, you know, at Pride, and to be part of something that is centric to you know, our community and the value that we sort of bring to our community, a recognition of that. It's been quite something over the last 30 years to see what Pride was and is now. And you know, I'm often very thoughtful about those times when I was much younger, but always felt an overwhelming sense of emotion by being sort of surrounded by my community and people. So I love Pride, and but it's interesting to see where it's certainly going. So yeah.
Wonderful. I you know, I really heard from all of you different things, but I really heard about the evolution of Pride, which was one of my questions that I wanted to ask, and I feel like you each answered that, and how interesting that is to hear that, you know, we all, and I won't share my own experiences, but how Pride has evolved for us. So I am curious. I'm going to put a question out there for folks, and you can just put your hand up, and then I will call on you to answer. But just curious about first Prides. Your first time ever going to Pride, what that was like. If you have an interesting story you are comfortable sharing, is there anyone that would like to speak to that? Dana.
Briefly, I'll just share that, you know, my first Pride was really in secret, and I remember being at the local bar that had the first Pride celebration, and you know, at this point I think I was found out, and it was not good, but I had gone to the Pride celebration, and I remember needing to check in home, let them know that, you know, I was going to be out for a few more hours, calling from a payphone. That just sort of nails it. And so the contrast for me was, I really needed to be part of this. I really wanted to go, and was worth risking sort of, you know, family relations, and, you know, the struggle of my conscience to lie about where I was and who I was with. They knew, but I had to live with that to experience this. And, you know, I certainly have no regrets about it, because the people that I knew at that Pride, I still know today, 30 years later. And, but I remember sweating it out on a payphone saying, yeah, I'm with friends, and I'll be home whenever. And then hanging up that phone, and wasn't sure if there was media, there was a way that I would be caught or you know, outed, and it was a time where you weren't publicly then, but it was a big deal to be in the parking lot celebrating Pride. So that was my first Pride.
Thank you for sharing that. Does anyone else want to share a first story? Bruce, I see you.
So some similar threads to what Dana was just saying. My first Pride, I celebrated in Halifax, Nova Scotia in the early 90s. And if there were 50 of us together, that was a big crowd. And we formed this little parade that marched down the street in fear and excitement. It was a real combination, a sense of what was going to happen, who was going to show up, and having police protection. And as you can imagine, this little group of 50-ish people going down the street, there were no floats or anything of that nature, some signs, lots of rainbow stuff and balloons. And it ended at the gay bar and the sense of celebration of being there and excitement and fear at the same time because of the chance of media showing up and being exposed, all blended together at that. And I have another thought that I want to share around a favorite moment. So fast forward from that to moving to Toronto and celebrating in Toronto with my partner. Friday night used to be the start of the weekend, was the fantastic time because everybody would just be coming into the city to gather. So it would be cool, you weren't out in the hot of the day, and you had a chance to walk around and meet friends, and you often met somebody who you'd only see on Pride weekend. So we had friends. I had been on a business trip, met some friends from Cincinnati. Just happened that one of them was coming to Toronto, stayed with us, and went down to Pride with us. But unknown to everybody else, our friend was into leather and was in a collar and had a leash. And my partner and I were holding the leash together in our hands. So we were just walking down the street holding hands. That's what people saw. And they'd come up to us and they'd greet us and they'd be talking. And then all of a sudden, every one of them, the eyes would go down to the hands and see that we had a man on a leash behind us. And it was so much fun that they just didn't know what to do with that.
Love that story. Does anyone else have any first Pride stories? Sammy? Sammy, just turn on your mic.
Hi, I forgot it was on. It was off.
Sorry.
So I remember. Do you remember the year that Toronto Pride had that bombing scare? Like 5-ish years ago, I think. I think that was my first Pride, and my birthday actually falls on the 24th. So that year it was on the weekend, and I was really excited because I was like, wow, like my birthday's on Pride. I'm gonna go to Toronto. I'm gonna have fun. Like it's gonna be great. And like 2 of my friends wanted to bail. I was very upset, and I was like, no, like you're not bailing on my birthday. Like this isn't happening. And I only had like my one shirt on, and she was very cold and she's very tiny. And I was like, here, you can just have my shirt. And I took my shirt off in the middle of like I think we were like in the middle of the village somewhere, and I just like took my shirt off and I gave it to her, and I was like, wear this, we're going and we're having fun, like I don't care. We find this like outdoor concert thing, and they have these like 4-foot barrels just like hanging off on the sides. I don't really know what they were doing there. And we ended up dancing on there. And like I just remember having like the best time ever. Started talking to like these 2 girls like that were in line behind me, and they like started flirting me, and I was like so excited. I was like 19, and I was like, oh my god, like what's happening right now? And I had like these like I had buttons on me. I didn't at this point, but I had like it's a boy and it's a girl, and they had seen me with that on earlier, and then like found me later on the dance floor and started dancing with me. And I just remember they both started dancing on me, and like they both started kissing me, and I just lost my shit. And that was like the best Pride like I've probably like ever had. So it was very different and wild for me. But yeah.
I love that. I'm sure we all have stories similar. And Galaxy, I realize I'm pointing at everyone. I apologize. Sorry.
These are some pretty amazing stories. My first experience of Pride was seeing it on the television, seeing like Toronto Pride and seeing how bright and colorful it was, and basically half naked cis white males mostly. Growing up, I grew up in a religious household, so that it was kind of something that we sort of just did not acknowledge, or it was, well, definitely frowned upon growing up in a religious household. So flash forward to my very first Pride. My very first Pride was when Toronto hosted World Pride, and there were rivers of people, and just being able to be in that environment. And because when I saw it on the television, I wasn't able to picture or imagine myself being there. I didn't, like, because I have a complicated relationship with my sexual identity, my gender identity, my racial identity. So I didn't feel like I was represented when I'm looking at it from that perspective. But being there and seeing how diverse it was, and seeing like everybody celebrating and everybody just having a good time, and they're not worried about what people are thinking. And I remember when I first arrived, it was overwhelming, because it was something that I had never been a part of before, and something that I did have a little bit of shame being there, because that was like where I shouldn't be. And yet I knew that I had to go. I had to be a part of that just to experience it at least once. And that was my very first experience with Pride.
Thank you for sharing. Anyone else? Anyone that didn't share? No? Oh, Olivia, yeah?
Yeah, mine's short, which is good, or at least short for me. As I said earlier, my first Pride was actually with my family. It was as a kid. They would take me and we would watch, and then throughout the years I would go with friends. My parents always knew I was going. I would also often run into my mom at the parade. Like if I had gone with friends, she'd be there with my little siblings. So I'm really lucky that I never got to experience that feeling of like, I'm not supposed to be here. It was always very much yeah, if you love people, you should care about them, and you should support them, and you should be all these different things, because that's what you do. Even if you aren't part of the community, you show up for the community. And then when I became part of the community, I was like, oh, like I didn't have to kind of work through that guilt or that. I had personal shame, but I didn't work through that family guilt, and I'm always really thankful for that. But I know I said earlier my first Pride being out was 2 years ago. I lied. I'm like, it was last year. This is my second Pride being out. And my first Pride, I went to Toronto, as everyone else does, and you have a great time, and you dance in the streets and you meet people. And a Pride moment that I'll never forget was there's this massive slide that I really wanted to go down. You know, you're kind of drunk and you're like, this is the best thing I've ever seen. It's a slide. How can I not? And they're closing it up. So I run up to this group of girls and I'm like, hi, can I join in with you? I'm a fellow lesbian. And they said, yes. And they're like, of course. And then they're talking, and the two girls are like, actually, we got married last week. She just engaged. Like, you know, we're so excited to be here. Like we're wise now. And I started crying because I was just so excited for them. And that realization of like, you're finally so where you belong. And then they actually cut off everyone else, minus like myself and those girls, from going on the slide. And so I thank them for that. But I also like think back on that memory very often, as like the pure joy you just can share for your community members and the ways that you want to show up for them.
Wonderful. I love that, and I love that it's very unique to hear your family bringing you, and I think that's very special. And so thank you for sharing. Has everyone had an opportunity to share with that question? I believe so. So the next question I'm going to combine, because as I said, everyone pretty much basically talked about the evolution of Pride in the first question. So the next question I want to ask is, how this year, considering it's 2020 and everything that we're going through, COVID, Black Lives Matter, how was this year's Pride different for you? And then I'm going to add in the piece of if you want to talk to the evolution of Pride for you, because I know for myself, this year has really been an evolution for Pride. So I'm going to tag those two questions together. So I'll repeat. Basically, how has Pride changed for you this year? How will you be celebrating or acknowledging Pride differently this year based upon COVID and Black Lives Matter? And if you want to speak more to the evolution of Pride for yourself as well. And how about we start with you, Bruce?
This is such a strange and unique year in so many different ways for all of us. And yet at the same time, really helping to bring back to what some of those core meanings and values are. The issues that have been playing out as we've been watching them, and the various protests in support of Black Lives Matter. I remember listening to the debate over the last couple of years with Toronto and Black Lives Matter, and somebody saying at one point in time, but the Pride Festival is all about fun. It's not about taking a stand and advocacy, etc. And I thought, what are you talking about? The very fact that we're being here is a political statement. It has always been just that. And the COVID piece has really cut down on the party and what can happen in the large way. So it's brought us to talk to one another like this and help to focus on some of those individual personal connections. And for me, I'm always about the deep meaning of things and the personal connection. And this is what's coming out this year for me. And that's one of the things that I'm seeing. So I'm hoping that we can maintain some of that deep connection as we continue to party in the future once COVID becomes less of an issue. And we need to remember that, yes, absolutely, Pride is all about taking a stand. So let's stand with all, because Black lives do matter.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. How about yourself, Galaxy?
This particular phase in our society, as Bruce said, is very unique. And having had the chance to reflect and see how my family and my friends and the community at large is dealing with this, what is essentially a mass trauma experience, and seeing how everyone is kind of figuring it out together in different ways. We've become a lot more resourceful. I think the priority has become in recognizing our humanity and being able to empathize with one another. And I think that's really the focus, is connection. So in regards to Pride, I spent a lot of time thinking about what Pride meant to me as a result of not being able to see my family and my friends. I isolated myself for a very long time. I went a little stir crazy, but I took that time to recall what was important to me and how I wanted to contribute in a positive way, so that the humanity in my friends, my family, and my community is being recognized, and how I can amplify that. Now, of course, with Black Lives Matter, I've been very vocal on the subject. Black lives do matter, obviously. I don't think that bears repeating. And I've been doing my best with the racial background that I have to be able to amplify Black lives in the ways that I can, or in the ways that I have the resources to be able to do. I'm a queer person of color, although people don't see it at first, because I relax my hair and I go through a process of trying to make myself palpable to or palatable to general society, because that's what I was taught growing up. So being able to stand essentially in two places at once, and to speak from my experience and to speak from my mother's experience, who is a visible minority, it's been very powerful. And I think this Pride has been extremely profound in many ways.
Thank you, Galaxy. Thank you so much for sharing that. How about yourself, Dana? How has 2020 and the events of 2020 shaped your view on Pride, or changed how you will be celebrating or contributing? And again, the evolution piece is in there as well, if you would like to speak to that.
You know, I'm still in a really thoughtful place about it all. You know, COVID in particular has been a challenge for everyone. There was a loss in my family, and you know, the days have been slipping by so quickly, and I have kids at home. My partner has kids. And the work that I do is, you know, is you know, talking to people who are sort of in the middle of this and struggling with in their addictions. And then certainly Black Lives Matter and the protests, which I did attend, needing to bring my family to attend that. They are people of color, and I needed them to be present and witness the support that is there for them. And I personally have been very reflective about my own thoughts of things. And I'm in a place of listening. Like, I believe that my role is to listen and to learn and to hear all points of view, and to be, for me, allyship within the Black community is about, I don't get to call myself an ally. I am given that title of ally by my behavior, by my willingness to learn, to my willingness to look to leaders and to everybody to listen. So I'm still very much in a place of thought about that and listening. And that's why I appreciate these conversations, because it can only enrich how I feel and think. You know, I'm certainly missing Pride here. I'm missing the visibility, I'm missing the community and coming together. And I'm thinking about the people who, there are still people in our community who the only time they get to be present in community is Pride. And that's still very much a reality. So there are people who gear up all year to either, you know, to attend Pride in a way that is honest to them, that they cannot be honest with in their day-to-day life. And I think they're really missing that. And so certainly through the efforts of Pride Committee and Andrew and all those folks who have been putting this together to connect people and keep people connected, I think that's really important. You know, I have a very good circle of friends and community and family. I'm grateful for that, and we will connect with each other. But I'm really thinking of those folks who need that connection. So I'm really in a reflective, thoughtful place, and I am missing that weekend for sure, but we'll figure out some kind of way to connect and collaborate and come together.
Thank you for sharing. And how about yourself, Richard?
Oh my gosh, yeah, there's a lot to think about here. I think I appreciate the things everyone has said. I think for me, it is kind of like what Dana was saying. It's just been a really intense period of reflection. I think for me, this time has been really challenging, just in terms of anxieties, uncertainties. Honestly, like myself, like a lot of people in my life, the people I work with in my work, getting through this time, just surviving, honestly, for a lot of people is just a big piece. of this. So when I think about what I'm doing, I think it's kind of some of the things that Dana shared, where this is my time to learn, my time to educate myself. Communication, like Dana had said that, and a few people did, right now I think is all about what are the ways we can find to reach each other, to have conversations, just making a phone call, connecting with the person, having a challenging conversation. Like I can think of times over the last couple of weeks, when we started to gather with people, having conversations where people bring up things like, they bring up things like reverse racism. They bring up things that wildly challenge me. And it's about how do you have conversations? How do you not cancel people? How do you actually engage in things that further these movements? Because I think it can be very easy, maybe not easy, but it can happen a lot in our society that we have a difference of opinion and we write each other off. So I think for me, it's about furthering conversations, having challenging conversations with people that are willing to actually engage in them. So I think it's been just a time where I'm trying to grow, where I'm trying to use, I know that I exist with a lot of privilege, with all of the things in my life that I exist in. And I think it's about how do I use that in a way that helps. And I think it's a lot about learning for me. And in terms of pride, it's really just about connecting with friends, family, and even then people that you don't really know, and finding ways to connect and find common ground. I appreciate all the things like the Pride London Festival has done. Still we're resilient, move things forward, still find ways to connect and have conversation. So I think for me, it has just been about connection and, getting through really one of the most difficult times. And all of us have different layers of challenges, obviously. But I think it's just about trying to find ways to still stay connected as best we can.
Thank you, Richard. And I do apologize. My camera shifted to my laptop. I don't know what I did there. But Sammy, how about yourself? What is this year, 2020, and everything that's kind of gone on? How has that shaped Pride for you, and kind of the evolution of Pride for yourself?
I think for myself, like this whole time, one of the things I've been thinking about is, when BLM was at Toronto Pride, and there was lack of support there, to say the least. I was there, I saw the booing, I heard it, and I think that for me this year, especially like with COVID happening and everything, I feel like we're seeing like we're seeing the things that people are like risking, like now with the protests that are happening, like they're out there every day, like they're fighting for something important, and like, yeah, they could get sick, but that's just like kind of the risk they're willing to take, and not to say that that's something that like we have to do with Pride again or anything like that, but just like that kind of drive and like that motivation, I feel like we kind of need that again, when it comes to like talking about important things within the queer community, and like like those political like topics, like BLM, and things like refugees and like immigrants, and like just like all the things that people have an opinion on, especially like for me, like I grew up in an immigrant home. Like I grew up Black, Arab, like Muslim, and came out at 11 as bi, and just like seeing how, like where it was, like when it first happened, and like reading about like the history of Pride, and kind of like what it stood for, like we needed that then, and I feel like we need it now, and we need it for, you know, like other members of our queer community, like for those Black members, you know, like for those people of color, just like, you know, people that you see outside of, I guess, like the norm of the queer community that is there. And I guess, yeah, that's kind of where I hope it goes with this whole COVID thing now.
Thank you. And last but not least, again, Olivia, how has the events of this year changed Pride for you or evolved Pride for you?
I think when COVID first happened, I, like many other people, went, okay, Pride is kind of canceled this year. And this is not a unique thought to me, but watching a lot of activists that I follow on Instagram, that I follow on different pages on Twitter, that I check in with, and watching BLM take over June, and June is normally typically Pride month, and realizing that no, like this is actually the truest we've seen Pride in a long time, at least to me. Pride, as we all know, started as a riot. And I'm not just referring to the Stonewall riots, I'm obviously referring to like Operation Soap in Toronto, and to the raids on Pussy Palace, and to all these different times wherein queerness and that identity was not only something that you just had to kind of be worried about, but where it was negligible and criminal activity. It was stuff that you could have your safe places raided for. And I think in some ways, like, this is a very necessary call on. Though COVID is an absolute tragedy, I was excited to be at the BLM protest and have like 10,000 people there, because I've attended a lot of protests in London. I'm an old SJPS, I'm not old, I just graduated last year, but I'm an SJPS grad that went to a lot of protests and sat in on a lot of things. And I've been at places, at protests where there's like 30 people. And so that momentum, that fury, this like real sudden look to say like, no, we not we need to do better, like not like we haven't heard it before, but to have everyone have to focus on it for once in their lives. To me speaks a lot to the fact that we all need more time to be politically involved. That's a different topic, but we all need more time to be politically involved, because I think in some ways we are very strapped, pulled thin. But also I think it made everyone kind of wake up to this idea of queerness is not contingent on whiteness. In many ways, whiteness and the colonization of just so many places by white culture really, it took away queerness from other people in other places. A lot of Indigenous folk, and I don't know if we have any Indigenous representation today, but you know, Indigenous folk will say queerness wasn't a problem until colonization. And so I think, yeah, that this Pride in particular is a real call on not only inclusivity, but solidarity, and being present and being accomplices to a cause rather than just standing with a cause. You need to get active. So yeah, in short, first Pride was a riot. Let's make this political again. Like, let's stand together with our like Black Lives Matter brothers and sisters, our queer brothers and sisters, our trans brothers and sisters, and so on and so forth. I was very excited for that question. I'm sure you can all tell.
Thank you so much. And I acknowledge that that question may have been difficult for some folks, for all of us. You know, definitely knowing that what the whole world is going through and whatnot this year. So I do appreciate everyone participating in that question and sharing your insight. So I had asked each of you to choose 3 questions from another list of questions that you would be interested to speak to. So we're going to now move to those questions, and just for time-wise, I'm going to put the question out there, and for those of you who really would like to speak to that question, please put your hand up, and I will go by who I see puts their hand up first. So this first question that I have is, how has your queerness shaped your personal or professional lived experience? And I just have to, so how has your queerness shaped your professional lived experience? Who would like to answer this question? Bruce?
There are a couple different ways. In particular, becoming a minister within MCC, Metropolitan Community Churches, it was a denomination founded out of the gay liberation movement in the States in the 60s. So to step into leadership within that meant you were taking on a mantle of sorts and saying, we're here, we're queer, and not only are we fabulous, but we're also spiritual. And all of those things can connect and exist in the same place. And there's no way of being quiet or timid while in a role like this, for example. But even before that, I had the privilege of working within the counseling industry for years. And I just made my mind up right from the start. If this was going to be an issue, then let's declare it up front and get it over with, and I'll move on to something else. But I didn't want to get into those conversations about what I did with my partner over the weekend and everything being sanitized. I wanted to be as legitimate as all of my other colleagues. So I just basically came out at work right away and had the very lucky experience of being accepted within that industry. But it always was important for me just to be able to say, this is who I am and what I'm about. And I expect you to take me just as seriously as you take the person next to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. Anyone else would like to share so how your queerness has shaped or impacted your professional or lived experience? Richard?
So I have worked in social services for a while, and really I've had a lot of focus on work within HIV. So I think it's been kind of a mixed blessing in terms of my identity. And I think it's actually something that has sometimes been really good and sometimes I've really struggled with, in that in a lot of the work that I've done, a lot of the folks that are most highly affected by HIV have been, men who have sex with men, gay, bisexual guys. And I think sometimes being that person, that is a peer to those individuals is great, because we share like a lived experience, we share some commonalities, which has always been like a great benefit. But then I have these moments like professionally too, where when something is so close to your heart and it is your identity, it can feed frustrations, it can make things more challenging. At least it's done that for me. So it's kind of towing this line where you're kind of working with the population that you are part of. So then you also can't, it's hard for me to not personalize that sometimes, where, to remove yourself from that is really hard, at least it is for me. So I think at times I love the fact, that I am a gay man and I work, and one of the populations that I really focus on in a lot of the work I've done is men who have sex with men. But at the same time, everything is so intensely personal for me that, at least professionally, keeping that distinction can be a real challenge. So I think that's one of the things in this work, where when you're fighting for something that means so much to you personally, which, I have a sense from everyone here that a lot of us are very passionate people. So I think for me, it's been keeping a balance of how do you manage that? How do you manage that when it's about your life and it's about your peers? So I think that's been something that has been good and bad, like in terms of the work that I've done. I shouldn't say bad, challenging.
Wonderful. Anyone else would like to speak to that question at all? I see Dana at the bottom.
Briefly, I mean, when I came out at such a young age, essentially I knew by year of 8 or 9 that I was different, and but I knew that since my influences of connecting with youth groups as a youth who attended a youth group, and meeting people in my community who at that time certainly was still affected by HIV and AIDS. I began volunteering at the AIDS committee, and I knew that this was a community that I felt welcome in, and visible, and able to contribute as myself. And I wanted to continue to find those spaces where I could really truly be myself, and connect with people who I wanted to create a safe place for other people as well too. I wanted that responsibility that if I was in this environment, that there was going to be other people who were safe for people to connect to. And I mean, I've held a wide range of employment, and been thankful that the choices that I've made and the opportunity that I've had did allow for me to continue to be who I was. And it developed my confidence in my abilities. It allowed me opportunities to connect with other people, to learn from, and to look up to. I very much aligned with the HIV/AIDS community, and continued to do some of that work because it was important, because it affected my community directly. I really needed to connect. And I just feel that the trajectory itself was, I wouldn't have met the people that I have met to this day, and made the community collaborations and developed the friendships and my own vision and passion and thoughts of things, and helped me to shape sort of who I am by being, out. But, I'm certainly not a product unto myself. I'm a product of amazing people that I've met and worked with throughout the years. And, my chosen way of living in my career and have all been strongly affected for the good, I believe. I remember my family was concerned about my safety, my physical safety in this world when I came out. And my gosh, I have not one regret of living out from the time that I could remember, and being true to myself and who I was. In the early years, certainly there was trepidation about, how to be in a workplace or in an environment and be yourself. I certainly was not. There was a time where I was certainly fearful, but I always had a community to come back to be myself and be safe in it. So I feel, I've made a lot of good choices in my life in terms of who I connected to and how I connected.
Thank you for that insight. I saw 2 other hands go up. Galaxy, we'll start with you.
Growing up, queerness and other aspects of my identity were associated with otherness, and otherness merited punishment. So there was no way for me to express myself authentically without having the repercussions. When I left home, I decided that since I'm always going to have that that aspect of otherness, I might as well own it. I might as well just make it a part of my identity. So I sought out all the things that I was drawn to, all the things that essentially were others. So I explored my own personal spiritual path, and I explored my own personal variation of how I presented myself. And I think having that that platform, that foundation, provided me with the means, like almost like a clean slate, where I can just, I can be whatever, because according to my background, I'm doomed either way. So I might as well enjoy life while I can. I might as well enjoy what this life experience is. And doing that allowed me to connect with people on a more authentic level and to be able to express myself authentically among these people and to be inspired by people who express themselves authentically. As far as career goes, I'm still young. I'm still figuring out what career is and where I fit in this capitalist society. And I find myself essentially pursuing avenues that I know where my queerness is going to be understood, respected, and valued. And that's why I ran for a place on the Pride board. That's why I have been very vocal about advocating for my community. That's why I'm an artist. That's why I do all these things that growing up would have been considered worth being punished for. I'm kind of taking that foundation and I'm throwing a rainbow on it and I'm just making it my own. And I think being able to do that has really made me a lot stronger as a person.
Wonderful. Thank you. And then I believe, Sammy, you put your hand up as well.
Yeah. So I would definitely say that my like queerness has like shaped me in, you know, various ways in my life, especially professionally for me. You know, I always find myself like trying to find like that job or, you know, that like opportunity that feels safe to me. Not like necessarily like safe, like, you know, it's not a challenge or anything like that, but like safe in the sense that I feel like I can, you know, be myself. And I think especially now, like that's something that I have to explore differently. I've, you know, been out as trans for like only a couple of years and just started testosterone about 2 months ago. And like just trying to find like where that kind of like puts me now. Because yes, I am trans masculine, but I'm still non-binary. You know, I still identify as such. And like, you know, that's something that people are still trying to like get their heads around, like not necessarily within the queer community, but just like, you know, like even like my friends and family who are like hetero and stuff like that. I feel like for me, like having my queerness in the past was definitely like a comfort, and now it's kind of just like grown with me and changed, and I feel like I can just be like a little bit, I don't even know how to word it. I don't know, just like a little bit happier, you know, like just making sure that like the things that I do personally and professionally fit who I am and like, you know, fit my values, not only in like other areas of my identity, like, you know, being Black and wanting to work for a place that, you know, is inclusive, like racially, but also like finding like a coffee shop I can go to, or like you know, a barber shop that will cut my hair and, you know, not give me a weird look because I'm sitting where like a man should sit. So yeah, that's my answer.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And does anyone else want to speak to that at all? All right, so my next question, so just for time's sake, there was 2 individuals that had said that they wanted to address this question. And this is both for Bruce and for Dana. We'll start with Bruce. So the question is, how did marriage equality change the way you experienced or viewed pride? We'll start with Bruce.
Thank you. My partner and I have been members of MCC Toronto for years. So when the first weddings were being planned that were going to challenge the law, we were volunteers helping to hold the service. And talk about a frightening and the kind of experience that really says, okay, we're putting ourselves on the front line. My role was a greeter at the door. Gee, that doesn't sound very filled with advocacy, except you have to remember there were people outside protesting and threats of violence and gun threats and all of that as well. So we had no idea who was going to be rushing the place. And I was going to be one of the first people that they would be meeting. So involved with that right from the beginning, to the point where Mark and I were able to get married ourselves. And the feeling of standing up in front of all of our wedding guests, saying our vows, really changed the experience of being together. It deepened it. We'd been together for 8 years prior to that. And all of a sudden, here we are declaring our love out loud in front of all these people. And it was a fabulous thing. And so we get then into Pride, and it's no longer just the celebration of relationships as they were, but relationships that are now getting recognized in the society in a larger way. And, you know, on one hand, it didn't change a thing, and on another hand, it changed everything. And so on the positive side, one of the things that I felt that it did was to really help have this sense of legitimacy is the word that comes to mind, but I don't really want to use that. But do you understand what I mean? It really said society is open now, and this is just a part of what we can do here in Canada. At the same time, it felt like we became a bit more mainstream at that time. And I felt that we have lost a little bit of the advocacy that Olivia was talking about that we need to maintain, because I absolutely agree with that. And that it was like, oh, we've achieved all of our goals. We have arrived. There is no arriving. This is an ongoing need to stand and be vigilant about our rights and the rights of all of those other folks who we stand as allies with. So a blessing and a downside as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that. And how about yourself, Dana?
Oh gosh, I don't think there's much more that I could add that Bruce so well. You know, I remember the times. Gosh, there was a time where I was in the bars here in London, the gay bars here in London, and before the legislation had passed, and there was somebody that came in, a young woman who was throwing her bridal party. What do you call that when you party before the wedding? So it was her and all her bridesmaids and whatnot. And I remember feeling a real punch in the gut that stayed with me. That, you know, but here we are. I can't do this, but I'm witnessing in my space. You know, somebody who was, you know, outwardly, you know, able to celebrate their, and you know, great that you felt that you could come into the bar and whatnot. I don't grudge for that, but it did stay with me. And so the time that passed, and I think it was 2005, you know, it was something it was an emotional thing, a realization of equality, but fearful for the scrutiny that would then come. I'm thankful that the social media of today was not available then, because, you know, I try not to read the comments, and I couldn't even imagine what the comments would have been. But because there was a pro and a con, or people who were against, and still are in 2020. But I just remember feeling a real sense of heightening of our community. But as Bruce sort of alluded to, it's a multi-layered experience of what that was, and what that would mean. And it's still a unique thing to me when I hear my friends are getting married. Wow, we can get married. You know, I remember when we couldn't, and to know the difference is quite something. So yeah, it's a good thing that we have that under the law of what that afforded each person who was married to go forward with their partner, and the rights that were afforded to you in, you know, medical decisions or being able to be at bedside in a hospital and all those sorts of things that came with that, which I think were really, really important and thankful for to have.
Thank you for your insight. And this is the one question that I wanted to add a little thing into. For me, a huge evolution and where pride really changed for me was the year that marriage equality became legal in Canada. And I lived in Toronto for over a decade, and this was in my early 20s. And I was at the parade, and I remember that all of the first couples that were married were in convertibles at the front of the parade. And there was an older couple, an elderly couple, standing in front of me as they went by. And here I am, this young person who felt like I had the whole world ahead of me, and that, I always truly believed that, I would be able to marry who I wanted to marry, that would happen. And I remember one of the folks standing in front of me turned to their partner, kissed them on the cheek, and said, "I never thought I would see this day happen." And in that moment, for me, my view and my understanding, I had this aha moment of, wow, there is so much more going on here than just the parade, the beer tents, the parties, this and that. And that was a really big moment of growth for myself, and an eye opener. So yeah, I thought that was an important question to put in there. And other folks hadn't highlighted that question. Does anyone else want to share anything about that question at all, or are we good to move on to our next question? Good. All right, so the next question I have is basically, what was it like coming out? And we have Sammy, Olivia, and Dana and Richard had said that they were interested in sharing about this question. So how about we start with Sammy, if you're comfortable. So again, what was it like coming out?
Well, for me, I had two coming outs. First, the first time I realized, I was queer and I liked girls, and, I was 11, had a best friend who had a crush on me and ended up telling me, was like, oh, I'm bi and I like you. And I was like, oh, I don't know what the hell that is. I was in a very sheltered home. I was like, I don't what does that mean? So she, explained it to me, and it's like, it's when you like both sexes. And I was like, oh, okay. That, I don't like that. I'm not that. And so that was kind of the end of that conversation for about a month, maybe a couple months. And then here I come back a little while later, and I'm like, oh wow, I like you. And just this, I had this whole change, this whole experience of realizing what being bisexual was, and then kind of exploring that. I remember I used to walk in the mall with my mom, and I used to stare at ladies' bums while they walked by, just they have a really nice butt. I don't know, I couldn't help myself, and I was just oh wow, I never really understood why I did that, because that's what a guy does, a gross dude or something. And then you know, I kind of like realized like, oh, like, you know, it's because I'm attracted to them and whatnot. I didn't end up coming out to my mom until I was 15. And she actually just found out. She had borrowed my phone, and I was in Montreal with like my family. And I remember being like very scared to tell her, and she saw my text message with my one friend, and I had basically said like, you know, if I die in Montreal, like if I don't come back, like I'm dead, like that's it. And like I remember being like very scared about it because, like, you know, I was raised in a Muslim home, like, you know, you learn all about these things from like TV and stuff, and like I never really like I was never really religious. Like, you know, my grandma prayed and stuff like that, but that wasn't something that I ever like had to do. So I remember being like, oh, I'm just gonna die. And she ended up like being like, hey, like we need to talk about this. And she holds my phone at me, and I just start running down the streets of Montreal. And she like follows me, like walks and like catches me at like this like corner, and it's like, you know, like it's fine. And I remember just like the relief of just feel like, oh wow, like I really like built that up like in like, you know, in my head, and like I like really like felt like those emotions. And then just like finally like getting that relief was like really great. I really got lucky, you know, with my mom being okay with it, especially because I did grow up in a Muslim home, and like have like, you know, those like family relationships. And then I guess like 2 years ago, so when I was 23, I had to come out again. And I was just in the car this time, coming back from like a like nice lunch. My mom's in the car, and I was in the car with my girlfriend. And I just remember driving, and I'm taking her home, and she says something about like, oh, you know, like I'll always love you, like you're my kid and stuff like that. And I just like turn around, and I'm like, I'm trans, like I'm transitioning, I'm a boy. And she's just like, oh, okay. And there's like obviously a conversation with that. But yeah, I just remember like those were, you know, I got really lucky with those experiences. And I'm so grateful for those experiences. I think about them all the time. They're funny stories to tell. And yeah, that was my adventure of coming out.
Thank you so much. Thank you for opening up about that. And how about yourself, Dana?
You know what? I'm happy to defer my time to another story. I got caught, and I'm just going to leave it at that. It did evolve itself, but that's a story that I've told Open Closet, and I think they still talk about it. I'm not even sure. It's an interesting, funny kind of story, but there was a transition period of difficulty, and then certainly I came into a community, and my family did embrace it eventually. And, you know, that's a whole other discussion about coming out, I think is really important to have, to tell those stories when there's lots of time to do that. But I'm just going to say basement windows. That's all I'm going to say. You never know who's looking through a basement window. So anyway.
Thank you. And just before we go ahead, perhaps we might run over a little bit in time if everyone is thumbs up with that. Just shortly, we have a couple more questions. But yeah. So Richard, how about yourself? If you like to share what was like coming out for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think so in terms of coming out, it's interesting because this makes me think of Dana actually, and when we facilitated a few groups together, and one of the things that we talk about often, which this question makes me think about, is the repeated need to come out. You know, we talk a lot about coming out sometimes, especially in the youth groups that we worked in together, as a singular experience, but it's just really not that. Even Sammy, in terms of talking about their experience in like coming out, as bi, coming out as trans, like I feel like this is an ongoing thing that we deal, that I have dealt with myself, and it sounds like other folks too, as a person who, I use the word queer for myself, that is queer, that my original coming out, you know, you could say it was when I came out to my best girlfriend when I was 14. Then I came out again to my parents when I was 17. Then I came out to everyone in my class in university. Then I came out to my coworkers when I worked in different places. So, you know, my original, like if you, it depends, I guess, on what you pick as what your coming out story is. You know, if you look at, sometimes I think a lot, for me, I often attach it to coming out to my parents. You know, I was raised Catholic. My mom is from Jamaica. My dad is Irish Catholic. So the coming out I had, you know, might have been, I was dating someone. I was secretly dating a guy like in his mid-20s when I was like 18. There was a lot of lying going on with my family. And I think I reached this point where maybe many of us did, where I'm like, I kind of want you to know who I am, what I'm doing. This wasn't necessarily the safest situation. So in a very kind of, you know, sort of, it might sound sort of textbook, you know, sat my parents down, told them I was gay. And it was interesting because like, it was a brief conversation. It was them crying. It was them, like Dana alluded to. And I think other people fear what's going to happen to you. You know, this was like in the early 90s. So like there was a lot of worry like for them about what was going to happen to me. Are you going to have a family? Are you going to have a career? Are you going to make it? And I think they were really scared for me. But then, you know, I married my partner years later, and that's almost like a different type of coming out. Like Bruce was alluding to, you know, our relationship was looked at very differently when we got married. It was seen as more valid. It was just seen as a different thing. So I think I would say like, I'm always doing it. Like, even if I go to the dentist and they're like, well, and I'm like, well, I need to make an appointment for my husband, and they might not know that I'm married to another man. So I feel like this is something that as queer people, it doesn't ever really stop. There might be kind of one, you know, big coming out depending on, and the other thing we talk about often in the groups we've done is that coming out is not an obligation. Like when I hear people talk about, you know, I didn't come out, like I love when I hear stories where someone's like, I just started dating this person. I didn't feel the need to announce or declare anything about who I am or who I'm attracted to. And everyone was like, cool. And I think that's almost for me what I want us to work towards, where there isn't an event where you say, this is who I am, but you just are who you are. And that's the world we live in. That's pretty idealistic maybe, but I think that's what I would hope for. Yeah, so my coming out is just all the time. But I find for me, it gets a little easier every time, especially as I've gotten a bit older. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that is like hearing both from Sammy and yourself, the acknowledgement that, you know, we are always having to make that decision to come out, and you know, there are those multiple times that folks are needing to come out and meeting new people, new situations, and all of that, and assessing safety and this and that and comfort level, our personal comfort level, and all of that. It is a really great point. Olivia, did you want to speak to that or at all?
Yeah, I'll speak to it, attempting briefly. As I've alluded to, my coming out process was fairly easy in the sense of like, I already had lots of queer friends. My family is very inclusive. They're very like, well, they're good advocates. They care. We go to protests. We do it. They're invested. But it was still really scary, which is kind of the shocking part, is that I knew it would be fine. I was so confident that this wouldn't be a problem. And yet there was still this like underlying fear of like, but what if it is? And I remember coming out to them via text. I was in Halifax. I had started dating a girl. That was its own messy story, but not messy bad, but just messy all over. I came to them via text and I was like, hey, I'm dating this person. Is that okay? Like, does that change anything? Both my parents being like, no. When are you going to Europe? Because I was going to study abroad. They're like, aren't you supposed to be abroad already? I was like, I'll be there soon, don't worry. So that was their bigger problem, was they were like, why aren't you where you're supposed to be? And so I really appreciate them for that. But then I also recognize like I have straight passing privilege. People never know I'm queer. No one ever knows until I'm like, actually, no, I'm queer. You know, I like women. I sometimes identify as a lesbian, sometimes I get queer. I'm back and forth between those labels. But it feels like there's this constant coming out process where people are like, yeah, but are you? And so in some ways that is such a privilege because I don't walk through the world with any fear versus I've had past girlfriends who did because they look very, they would identify as looking very butch. But then there's also that part of like almost not feeling like you are queer enough because you don't look it enough. So it is that constant coming out. But I think you always come out. You're coming out all the time. And that's just kind of part of the experience. And I think the other part of the experience is having so much of your coming out influenced by external factors. I had no reason to fear that my parents were going to be upset. But because TV and narrative and media and everyone before me makes it seem like it should be a big deal, it felt so much bigger than it was in my own personal life. I think it's my answer.
Perfect. So wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. So we are out of time, but I will ask the last couple questions, but please keep in mind the time when you are answering. I just feel that they are important questions to address. So basically, the question that I would like to ask now, and most of you have said that you would like to speak to this question. Again, keep it, try to keep it a bit brief, but what are your hopes for the queer community and future Pride events? And a lot of you may have already spoke to this. So basically, what are the hopes for the queer community and future Pride events? How about we start with Richard?
My hopes. I don't know. I mean, I think I was chatting with a friend of mine about this just today, and I think one of the things that I hope for is that we find ways, and this might make me sound like yesterday a little bit, but I just hope that we find ways to come together physically and get up out of our chairs and meet each other in physical places that are real. And not, I mean, this is an interesting thing for me to say in the times that we exist in terms of COVID. And there's lots of things that we're doing virtually, which is all great to stay connected. But I think I just hope for more intersections between folks that don't think they have things in common, that think that their struggle is very individual, and that we can meet each other and see the commonalities and a lot of the differences that exist. And I would love it if we had more physical spaces to do this. I think there's something that happens that's very powerful when you have people in a room having conversations and figuring things out as a community. I'm all for, you know, prides that involve parties, and I love drag and I love like entertainment, but I also think there's a lot of political pieces. And some of the things that I've seen happen for Pride here in London, you know, panel discussions on what it means to be non-binary or what it means to be intersex, to have these conversations, you know, what it means to work with racialized communities and the different things that exist, and people from those communities speaking to their own experience. Those are all of the things that I hope for. And I think a lot of them are happening, and I just hope to see that they continue. Because I think those conversations are starting to happen, and we're starting to see that there's many identities that we all exist in and lots of ways that we connect with each other. And I hope that we continue to explore all of those things and talk to each other and ask questions. And one of the things that keeps coming up, you know, as we talk about Black Lives Matter is you are going to screw it up. You're going to say the wrong thing. Keep doing it, you know, like make mistakes. And I think we need to do that more with each other and be willing to take risks with each other and not cancel each other. That's what I hope for, I think, for Pride, but also more broadly, like in the queer community, but also just in our community, however we want to identify that word.
All right, wonderful. Thank you for that. And how about yourself, Dana? What are your thoughts on that question?
Oh, I don't know if that was one of the questions that I selected, but I think Richard spoke to it really, really well. It's just being willing to come to the table. I feel like there's a lot going on, a lot of talk, but is there talk with each other in a way that we can actually really truly listen? And like Richard said, I think that deserves a physical space to do that. So I miss physical spaces. There were more than just Pride when it happens, when we're all together. I don't think once a year is enough. I miss those places. I miss places that are unique to our community. I'm okay with, sort of not assimilating, but being welcome to many more spaces, but I miss our space. And I miss having that dialogue in those spaces. So that's what I kind of hope for, that we can, like Richard said, gather physically and talk and be. And yeah, so brief answer, but yeah, that's what I'm hopeful for.
Wonderful, thank you. And how about yourself, Sammy?
Yeah, so I feel like for me, I just I want more that learning and that unlearning within the queer community and within Pride. And I feel like this year we've really seen that happen. And how Richard said, that's something that I would like to see more of, and I'd like to see a continuation of that, where you not only have respect for the whole term of queer, and you try and you're trying to be there for everybody that's your friend, all those people that you're comfortable with. I'd like to see more people within our community get uncomfortable again with each other, if you're gay or lesbian, and you don't know a lot about trans people, hang out with more trans people, if you are white or Black or Indigenous or Asian, and you don't know something about another race, go hang out with somebody who you can get along with, and have those uncomfortable conversations with that are from that race, get to know things that you don't know about. And I think that would make the queer community a lot stronger, and really bring people together. Yeah, so that's what I like to see more of.
Perfect, thank you. And how about yourself, Olivia? What are your hopes for the queer community going forward and future Pride events?
Are we going to ask the allyship question? Because if we ask that, I'll pass on this one. But if we don't ask
All
that
right,
one,
I am going to ask that one, yeah. Next.
I'll pass
Correct.
for now then.
All right, perfect. So, Bruce, how about yourself?
My answer is going to sound a whole lot like what's already been stated. But I hope that as the days and years of COVID pass and we're able to physically be in the same space with one another, once again, that for Pride, we remember it's more than just a party. We have the party, we have the celebration, absolutely. That's important. But we also need the connection. We need that intersection of stories and experience and the passing of that in order for us to grow. And would really love to have a community that grows in depth and in richness of understanding, as opposed to just having a great party.
Very well said. And Galaxy, I left you for last because I want to combine two questions. And so I would like to know your hopes for the future of the queer community and Pride. But there was also a question that you had wanted to answer about what are things you wish other people understood about the 2S LGBTQ+ identities. So, and I think that kind of fits in with the whole question. So that's why I wanted to combine those two for you.
Okay. So really what I'm going to say is basically going to echo what everybody else has said so very eloquently. I would like to see people kind of get out of their bubbles. As queer people, I notice we tend to flock with what we're most comfortable with, what we feel safest with, and I think that's come to a bit of a detriment for our community as a whole. We have a lot of fissures and cracks that we need to gap. I would like to see more panels involving intergenerational discussions. I would like to see more panels involving racial discussions. I would like to see more panels involving the many aspects of the LGBTQ2+, that entire rainbow. There's so much information, so much experiential knowledge that we can all benefit from. So I'd really like to see us get out of our safe bubbles and reach out a bit to our community and to learn. And as far as the second question, I want people to understand that it's not really that much about identity, it's about connection. It's about being able to relate to another human being. It's about being able to empathize with another human being. And I think it's constantly evolving, it's constantly changing. And I think that's an amazing thing. And I think if we are more fluid with our understanding of how humans work and how we connect, and we connect so fluidly and so beautifully, I think we can really learn a lot.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. And now we have our final question. And what I'll do is I'll share the question, and then again, if you want to put your hand up and you feel you want to share your thoughts and insight on this question, that would be wonderful. So basically, this final question is, how may folks start or continue to be allies or advocates for the queer community, and also show their pride? Before you put your hands up, just one moment. I need to zoom in to make sure I see you all. So who would like to speak to that question? Olivia.
Yeah, I think a lot about allyship. I think it's an important aspect of bridging different communities and being caring citizens and being productive, and recognizing that so much more often than not, we have way more in common than we have against one another. I think it's very much beneficial to think that we are more different than we are connected. I think that serves a lot of different greater powers and systems of power, frankly. And so to me, that part of moving forward, that part of allyship is to show up and to know you're going to show up wrong. And that's okay. Like, you are allowed to show up and be mistaken, but you have to be so willing to be corrected. I like to think I'm corrected in my allyship often, because if I wasn't being corrected often, then I really am not doing that kind of unlearning and that tough work that Sammy mentioned. The other thing I think is, and this is like kind of a boring answer, it's so common, but read. Like, do the reading. There's so many books there's on lived experience. So do the reading before you start asking kind of those like racism 101 questions, or those queer 101 questions, or feminism 101. I'm like, just like, do your feminism 101 reading list first. Get a little bit of that information. And then we can have really in-depth and interesting and more articulate discussions about progress and moving forward and activism and allyship. Because answering those kind of 101 questions, I think in some ways, those are the exhausting questions. Like, when I get like, why are you a feminist? I'm like, that's a lot now, isn't it? But when I get, how do you counter white feminism in your own life? I'm like, that's an interesting question. We can talk about that. So I think allyship moving forward is knowing that you've got a lot of resources, you've got a lot of time to do the work, and then to please show up for the queer community and recognize that that queer community that needs you most right now is your Black, Indigenous, POC, trans community. You know the things that you've won, or people have won for me more accurately, really, because I wasn't like advocating past tense, I'm so newly queer. But know where the wins have been made, and then know where you need to show up for someone else. It's my big, long answer.
And then anyone else like to share final thoughts on that question? How about Bruce?
A short and a quick answer. I think one of the key things is for us to pay attention to ourselves and start to notice what makes us uncomfortable, and then be curious about it and ask why. And as we're listening to that, start to question more and more what we're finding within ourselves, because that then opens up the opportunity to go and ask some questions and to form some connections with other people.
And I saw Richard's hand up.
Yeah, I might be repeating things, but someone said earlier, it might have been Dana, that, you don't get to decide if you're an ally. I think there's been times in my life where I'm like, I'm an ally for this community and this community, but you actually don't get to say that. I think that's something that is kind of put upon you, like, oh, I see that this person is like really an ally for this community. So I think it's that. And I think I would echo some of the things that were said about being willing to make mistakes, being uncomfortable, like Olivia said, like reading, and like don't learn off of the backs of other people, because a lot of people are tired of educating people about things. And there's like, it sounds funny, but people often say, well, Google it, figure it out. There's lots of information that you can find about these things. And I think for me, one of the things personally that I'm trying to get better at is just speaking up in conversations where things are said that are not okay and that are uncomfortable, and make it more uncomfortable. And I think that's one of the things that I've made my personal goal. If someone, I work a lot in the work I do with people who are injection drug users. I'll use that as an example. And lots of times in my daily life, people say things that are really inappropriate about people that have substance use issues and are on mental health. And I've made it, it's my personal piece to speak up and say, hey, I'm not going to attack that person. I'm going to say, here's why I think what you're saying is not okay. So I'm not going to say I'm an ally to that community, but I am willing to speak up and defend people that I know in that community, and people that I consider my friends that are part of that community. So I'm not perfect. And I think it's also forgive yourself for those times where someone says something really awful and you don't speak up. That's okay. You're not going to be perfect, but I think we strive to do those things. And we also have to forgive ourselves if we're not always what we ideally think we should be in those situations, because it's not easy. So being compassionate to yourself, I think, is also important.
Wonderful, very well said. Anyone else would like to share before we close? No? All right, well, I have to just say I am just so proud to have been able to bring together such an incredible group of people, and to hear all of your insight and your voices, and the stories and experiences you have shared. So thank you so much to each of you for participating in this. I would like to thank Andrew for the background tech, and of course Pride London Festival for collaborating with us on this. And a huge thank you to Jennifer for keeping up with us. And it was a long conversation, so thank you so much. And I'm really looking forward to seeing you all again at some point. And so thank you very much. So that ends our Pride stories yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And again, I just want to thank everyone that has been involved and made this